I want to bring in Robert Ehrlich, former Republican governor of Maryland. Robert, I didn't know that Maryland had Republican governors, but I'm quite prepared to accept that you were a Republican governor.
There's not many of us.
No,
there's not many of us. And by the way, we were a non-breed, actually. By the way, the first campaign I ever volunteered for as a young puppy was Dave Smick for Congress.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well,
that's true.
He was with us about 10 minutes ago, as I'm sure you're sure.
I know. I watched him. Yeah. Now, we love Jack Kemp, obviously, and what he said about Jack Kemp and the role he played in '81 and '86 with regard to tax reform is very relevant to this discussion, Stuart.
Now, if we get tax reform, and by that I mean a cut in individual tax rates and corporate tax rates.
And corporate tax rates.
If we get that, and we get an infrastructure package, a big one, and we get them all this year, is it fair, do you think that we can in fact create, what, 500,000 manufacturing jobs and bring them back to America? Is that possible?
Throw a repatriation deal in there, too, by the way, because I don't think this border tax, it splits our base, and you've been talking about this. I don't think it's going to work. But quite frankly, Stuart, the expectation with regard to the Republican base, the right-of-center base in the country, the majority of the country is, listen, you said you wanted the House, we gave you the House. You said, geez, you couldn't get it done just with the House, we gave you the Senate. Well, then you said you needed the presidency. And obviously now we have the presidency, so you have all three. The lesson in Washington is that if you have all three, you can get a couple big things done, particularly in the first 2 years. And obviously tax reform with regard to individual rates, corporate rates, a repatriation deal, and an infrastructure deal is very doable. I think it's going to be done. I think it has to be done. By the way, a deal could also include just rates, by the way. Not necessarily getting into preferences and border taxes and all that.
You could just do the rate system. I mean, you could say the corporate tax is no longer 35%, it's 20%. The top rate of income tax is no longer 39.6, it's 33%. You could just do it as simply as that.
Yeah, you could, and obviously that's less messy because, particularly with regard to the border tax, it splits your base. It's going to be hard enough to get all the cats in the same room at the same time. If you have something that really splits your political base, you know, the exporters love it, the importers hate it, and they're all going to be in D.C., obviously, they're all going to be down the throats of members. Plus, let me also say this. The great lesson, again, in Washington is try not to do things in a partisan way. That's why Obamacare had no reservoir when it ran into trouble. To the extent you can pick off some moderate Democrats for a mega deal, which includes infrastructure, the better off you're going to be.
I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying, Governor, and I think you're saying that border tax, it's got to go. That's a non-starter if you want a deal. You saying that?
That's my strong suspicion because, again, with all the heavy lifting you're doing with regard to just taxes, and then heavy lifting with regard to immigration, and heavy lifting with regard to Obamacare, and everything else you want to do, again, you know, there's only so much you can get done at one time, and I think to the extent you can get a really good deal done, because, Stuart, bottom line is, this election was about growth. If we would have had 2.5%, 3% growth, Hillary Clinton would have been president. President Trump picked off all those working class Democrats because of 1.5% growth. And to the extent he can point to growth in excess of 2.5%, he's got a great chance of being reelected.
Last statement from me. If you don't get tax reform this year, and if you don't get an infrastructure plan, the Republicans in 2018 are toast, and so is the Trump stock market rally. You agree with that?
Yes, I do. It's going to be hard to go to the base and say, geez, you know, you gave us what we asked for, yet you didn't deliver. Where's your credibility? But I do think, I'm an optimist. I do believe that this is relatively low-hanging fruit, particularly with regard to tax reform. It can get done. It will get done. You'll see increased growth. And I will say this, by the way, people shouldn't get lost in the weeds of the daily, as Dave Smick said, it's going to be daily battles, this collateral issue, that collateral issue. They just can't get lost in the weeds of the daily headlines, because 81 and 86 was not pretty, but it got done.
And we can't be messing around with bathroom policy either. Bob Ehrlich, always a pleasure. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Coming
Stuart.
in soon.